Episode of Cooking Connected. My name is Anna Snelchis, and I'm a SNAP Ed educator with the University of Minnesota. And I'm here today with my colleague Dion.
Hello.
And Dion is also a SNAP Ed educator with U of M Extension, and she is going to be our chef today. Cooking Connected, if this is your first time joining us, welcome, first of all, is a program that we do every Thursday, an episode just for about 30 minutes that focuses on a nutrition or physical activity topic, and then also a recipe demonstration. And Cooking Matters Minnesota is a partnership between Share Our Strength and University of Minnesota Extension. And together, we offer Cooking Matters throughout the state, which is traditionally a 6-week program. And the group meets for 2 hours once a week to talk about different nutrition topics, budgeting, trying new recipes together and new foods. And these hands-on classes are taught by extension educators, culinary experts, and work to help teach Minnesota families that healthy cooking can be delicious, enjoyable, and affordable. So we will kick it off by having Dion share with us what our recipe is for the day.
Thanks, Anna. Today we're going to make a red lentil dal recipe. This recipe is pretty simple, is something you can really customize to whatever you like. But it's going to give us an opportunity to use lentils, which are a great protein source that can often be found cheaper than some of our other protein sources. And they're shelf stable, so we can just keep them around for whenever we want to use them. So I'll go ahead and get started here. Just need to make sure the tech issue at the beginning, and now I have to readjust my screen. I'm going to shut this camera off for a little bit, and then we can just...
Hey, Dion, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
So sorry. I think... All right, give me a minute.
We see the beautiful display of ingredients, though. And while Dion is kind of finishing setting up, I will just mention that in the chat or in the discussion piece, once this is posted, we have a short survey, as we do really value your feedback on Cooking Connected and the recipes that we make. So you can follow the link to that survey, and we greatly appreciate it.
Can you put the other camera? There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So some of the ingredients we're going to need today are lentils, of course, and I've rinsed my lentils, and that's something you want to do because when they're harvested in the field, there might be some dirt, possibly some rocks left in there. So it's a good idea to just rinse them and then pick out if you do see any foreign material. It's not common, but sometimes you will see that in there. So we have 1 cup of red lentils, and you could use any color lentil, but this recipe does call for red. We also have some vegetables that are going to go in this recipe. We've got 1 onion, a jalapeno pepper, some ginger. We're aiming for about 2 teaspoons of ginger, but this is pretty customizable. So whatever you have, you can adjust to your own preferences. And then 1 to 2 cloves of garlic. I've already gotten all of these washed, but that's something you want to do at the beginning. We also will have 1 can of diced tomatoes. You could also use fresh, but in the spirit of using ingredients that we could keep around, diced tomatoes will work well in this recipe. We need a little oil, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and then we will need an additional tablespoon of olive oil later on, but you want to keep them separate. And then we have lots of spices in this recipe. That's the hallmark of this recipe. And again, these can be adjusted to your own tastes. But we have here, the recipe actually calls for whole cumin seeds. I didn't have any cumin, or whole seeds. I just had powdered already, so that will work too. You might just want to reduce the quantity a little bit. So I've got 1/2 teaspoon of cumin, half a teaspoon of whole mustard. Again, you can substitute powdered if you've got that instead. Half a teaspoon of ground turmeric. Half a teaspoon of paprika. And then we have a teaspoon of salt as well. So I like to get all of my ingredients ready to go in the beginning. The next thing we need to do is start chopping them to finish the preparation. Then once we have everything chopped and ready to go, this recipe goes pretty quickly. So I'm going to move this to the side. Grab our veggies to start here. Going to begin with the onion. I like to wash my onion first, even though it's got that peel that I'm going to take off. When we cut onions, you can actually cut it open, and then that'll make it easier to peel. So I like to cut from the top end to the root end, cut it in half first. And then I like to make a little triangle cut at the top of my onion. That'll make it easier to peel. And keep a bowl nearby you for the scraps to go in. The scraps are great for making vegetable stock, or you can compost them. I think we've talked about vegetable stock a lot on this channel. But it's a good place to put all your veggie peelings. You can just keep them in the bag in the freezer until you're ready to go. I'm going to cut my other onion and peel it. That's another reason to wash your onion ahead of time. Don't want a bunch of dirt in your vegetable stock. All right, I've got my onions ready to go. I'm going to work with the lines of the onion that run from the root end to the top, but I'm not going to cut all the way through to the root. So I really want my onion to stay together while I'm cutting. You see, I'm just cutting lines down the onion here. And keep moving your hand. And then I'm going to go perpendicular, the opposite direction from where I was going, and I'm going to cut all the way through this time to dice the onion. We also like to use this claw so that our fingertips stay out of the way. So I'm going to use my claw to grip the end of the onion as I get closer to the root end. Cut as far as you can go. And then look at that beautiful onion here. Now our recipe really calls for 1.5 cups of onion. This is a pretty big onion, so I'd probably get more than 1.5 cups out of it, but I'm not going to measure. I'm actually just going to put it all in. It's all right. The recipe is not super particular, but if you've got some leftover onions you're working with, you could certainly measure to get more accurate. I like to clear my cutting board off between things that I'm cutting. Cutting along the ends there. There, of course, are many different ways to cut an onion, but this is the one that works best for me. If you're not super comfortable, try different ways. You can also find a lot of videos on YouTube that will slowly walk you through the steps of cutting an onion. Since so many recipes begin with that step. All right, we'll clear off the rest of this onion here. Notice that I'm using the back side of my knife rather than the blade part. If you scrape the blade across the cutting board, it tends to dull your knife. So you do want to use that back side or another utensil to scrape your cutting board clean. All right, that was a fragrant onion, so I'm going to move on from that and cut our jalapeno next. So when I cut jalapenos, my hands are a little bit sensitive and I want to make sure that I don't hurt my eyes if I accidentally touch them later. So I like to wear a pair of gloves. They can be a little spicy on your hands or anything else you touch. I'm going to begin by cutting off the top and then cutting the jalapeno in half so that I can scrape out these seeds and membranes. There's nothing wrong with leaving them in, but they will add some additional heat. So if that's not something you're keen on, or if you don't like the texture, go ahead and take them out. Some people I know like to rinse their peppers afterwards to make sure you get all those seeds. It depends on how particular you are. All right. And then with our pepper here, we're going to try to cut into strips again, like we did with the onion. And I'm going to cut this pretty small. We're mincing rather than dicing this time. So cutting in small strips, you can see there, pretty small. I'm going to cut all the way along. All right, and then similar again to how I did the onion, I'm going to cut in the opposite direction to mince. I'm getting real close, kind of using a rocking motion with my knife to cut along, and again using that claw. And then if you do want to mince even further, you can use the palm of your hand against the back of the knife and chop like this. Gonna do the other part of the jalapeno here. Same thing. This recipe, it says 1 jalapeno or about 1/4 of a cup. Well, I think my jalapeno is a little bit big, like the onion. So you can choose how much of it you really want to put in. If you love spice, put in as much as you have. And if not so much, you can save the jalapeno for another recipe. You can even freeze it pre-chopped like this if you don't think you'll use it in a while. All right. You can't really see in the video, but I am putting the bowl right at the edge of my countertop when I do that so that I can go just straight off the board and into the bowl. We've got our garlic next. Garlic to peel, sometimes you can use the back of your knife. Be very careful of that blade. If you press down and kind of crack the skin, often makes the peel come off more easily. That cracking sound. And just like the other ingredients, this one you can certainly adjust to taste, however much garlic you like. We're going to slice the garlic for this recipe, just nice and thin slices. This peel's giving me a little bit more trouble here. Here we go. So I'm going to slice in this direction again, going kind of towards the root. Garlic is a little tricky because of how small it is. I like nice big cloves whenever possible. They can be kind of hard to find sometimes. But if you have access to a farmer's market in the summertime, the garlic that can be grown in Minnesota, it's called hardneck garlic. It tends to have bigger cloves than a lot of the stuff we find in the store that's called softneck garlic, which can be really nice for cooking with. I'll separate my slices a little bit there. And I'm going to put these in with the jalapenos. They're all going to go in the recipe at the same time. So that's a pro tip. Go check out your farmer's market for large cloved garlic. The only thing is it does not last as long as the softneck garlic. So that's why it's hard for us to find in the grocery stores. But this is garlic I grew in my yard last year, and it is still lasting from about last August when I harvested it. So lasts a decent long time. All right, then I've got my slices there again. Okay, last thing that we need to chop is our ginger. I like to peel my ginger before I chop it. Not a requirement necessarily, but often this fibrous texture is a little bit of an undesirable texture. Just a standard peeler will work. Can't really see what I'm doing. There you go. Got a tough spot there. I might cut that off. You can also just use a knife if you don't have a vegetable peeler around. This garlic is giving me some trouble. It's very naughty, as in like KNO. All right, almost got it peeled here. Whoops. And then we're going to mince this ginger. So similar thing to all of our vegetables. Cut it kind of in these planks first. Once I've got it to that level, I like to just set it on that flat surface. Makes it a lot easier to cut when you can create a flat surface with your vegetables. Right from there, I'm going to make some strips. Likes to run away on you a little bit, but this ginger is another great one to use the chopping technique that I showed you with the jalapenos, especially when it likes to run away on you. Mincing it really helps it release all of its flavor, so I like to get it nice and small. Keep scooting it together. All right, I'm gonna dump that into the bowl. All of this is going in the same time. So I'm not going to worry about separating it at this point. Okay, and now I believe we are ready to start cooking. I'm going to take these gloves off. And I'm going to scoot my camera over a little bit so that you can see the stove here. So I like to use a nice big pot for this so I have lots of surface area on the bottom. And I'm going to just start sauteing my onions and then adding these other ingredients on just a medium heat. Put in my olive oil. Wait for that to get a little hot. Like I said, onions first, then we'll add this stuff. These are a little bit more delicate than the onions, so we don't want to risk burning them. We want to cook our onions a little bit ahead of time, give them a head start. kind of hear it's starting to sizzle in there. It's a good idea to wait till your oil is hot before you start adding the ingredients. Otherwise, they'll just soak up all that oil right away.
Dion, as you're cooking the onion, I have a question from earlier.
Yeah.
When you were cutting the onion, you said you can save your scraps to do veggie broth.
Yes.
What kind of ratio do you do? Like, how much, food scraps do you collect before turning that into broth?
Yeah, that's a good question. I personally am very non-specific about it. I really just have a gallon-sized bag in my freezer, and when it's full, I turn it into broth. But I do like to somewhat manage what I'm putting in there. So I like to have a good number of onion skins, but if I feel like, I've only been putting onion skins in there lately, I might choose to just compost some onion skins for a bit. I like to put in a lot of celery scraps, like those ends of the celery that you might not use if they're a little tough. Carrot ends. I like to put those in. So those I think are the three that I like to make sure I have a fairly good balance of, and then kind of whatever else ends up in there. But I don't know. Some people are probably a little bit more specific about it than I am. And maybe you get a better product, but I'm pretty casual about it.
Well, carrots, celery, and onion sounds like that would make a really delicious broth. So
yes, those are all really good ones. You can put in most anything, but some of the things that I would stay away from, or at least limit, would be like anything in the cole crops family. So that's our broccolis, our Brussels sprouts, cabbages. Those are going to really taint the flavor. So if you plan on making cabbage soup with the broth, it's probably fine. But if you want to do anything else with it, it is going to kind of carry that cabbagey type flavor. All right, I'm going to add the other ingredients here. Just going to cook these ones a little bit. Like I said, they can have a tendency to burn, which we really don't want to have. And then when these are cooked, I'm going to add in my lentils, water. I forgot to mention at the beginning, we want 2 cups of water. And then those tomatoes and the salt. And then it's just going to cook for a while. So let me do that now. And then I will turn it over. All right, so I'm going to put in my water, keep things from burning in there. Add my lentils. Oops, they got a little stuck in here because of the water when I rinsed them. Oh, come on out, lentils. No, my hands are clean, so I'm going to use my hands. Sometimes they are our best tool in the kitchen. There we go. And then our can of tomatoes. When you use cans, you want to wash the lid of that can off in case anything from your cabinet or the store got on top of there. You don't want it to end up in your can when you're opening. And then we do want to put in the whole can, juice and all. Sometimes, depending on the recipe, you drain that juice. This one, you want it all in there. I'm going to put that salt in. And then this is just going to cook. I'm going to bring it to a boil and let it simmer for like 30 to 40 minutes. And then we will cook some spices to mix into it. All those spices that I showed you at the beginning, just saute them in little olive oil, mix them back in with the lentils, and you're ready to go. So I'll pass it over to you, Anna, while this cooks.
It looks good so far. I have a question. So you're using red lentils. I know I've used green or brown colored ones that I found at the store. Is there a difference between them, or could any work in this recipe?
Yeah, they are just different varieties of the same crop. So they do have some differences, but they certainly can be substituted for one another. So this recipe is more traditionally made with red lentils, but there's no reason you couldn't use a brown or a green lentil in it instead. Yeah, sometimes they are easier to find one or the other. So yeah, very comfortable substituting.
All right. Well, while that's cooking for a few minutes, I'll just take over. So today our short lesson is on physical activity instead of a nutrition topic, as we know that being active and good nutrition are equally important as we're working toward living healthier lifestyles. So I'm just going to highlight a few things. So the physical activity guidelines for Americans recommend roughly 150 minutes, so 2.5 hours per week of moderate activity, or 75 minutes of vigorous activity. And that is for adults. For kids, they should be having roughly 60 minutes of activity per day. So hopefully they're getting some of that at school, but most likely activities before or after school will have to be worked in as well. And then for preschool age children, activity it's really just about creating a positive association with movement through different activities, working on those motor skills and getting kids comfortable with moving. And the most recent guidelines, kind of the motto is move more, sit less. So in the past, the guidelines have recommended, bouts of activity of 30 minutes at a time. But what researchers are finding is that really any movement can contribute to those minutes that we should be active per week and can have positive health benefits. So really the main thing to keep in mind is sit less and move more. And so another important thing is just finding ways of moving that make you feel good. So, whether it's running, walking, playing with your kids, or gardening, anything like that. It's really about finding what you like to do and working that into your day-to-day schedule. So it's recommended to do a combination of aerobic and strengthening activities. So aerobic activities use large muscle groups over an extended period of time. So that would be things like running, walking, swimming, dancing. Those are all examples of aerobic activity. Another kind of activity would be muscle strengthening. So that would be gardening, if you're using a hoe or a shovel, body weight exercises. So that would be, standing up and doing just some squats up and down, or resistance bands. So all those things are good for muscle development and strength. The third, so we had aerobic activities, muscle strengthening, and then bone strengthening. So bone strengthening is important for really all ages, young kids as they're growing and developing, and then also an older age as we become more at risk for, osteoporosis. Keeping those bones strong is really important. So those kinds of activities include walking, jump rope, lifting objects, around the house, or lifting weights, and day-to-day activities like taking the stairs. So really a mix of activities is good and important to work into daily lives. And we know the health benefits of being physically active. So reducing risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and also there's a lot of mental health benefits to physical activity as well. So for some of the more common, diagnoses, so depression, physical activity can help prevent onset and or be helpful in treating depressive symptoms. And its research shows that sedentary or less active individuals tend to be at greater risk for those depressive symptoms. And then for anxiety, we know that physical activity, there are correlations to fewer symptoms of anxiety, and physically active individuals report lower levels of those symptoms compared to less active ones. So one first step is just becoming more aware of how you feel, while you're exercising, and while you're not, and how that contributes to your mood and your feelings, and your overall feeling of health. So just as we wrap up here, I want to say, as if you are currently active, great. If you're thinking about it, great. The first step is to figure out, what's your motivation? How can being active fit into your daily life and your daily activities? Having a support system, so someone to be active with, is really helpful in, maintaining those activities and making it a part of your day-to-day life. And then setting goals and starting really small, and working up towards from where you started. And I will leave it at that and hand it back over to Dion to check in on the doll.
Thanks, Anna. That's some great advice about being active and some of those first steps that we can take. So the doll has been boiling. I just turned down the heat. And I will just quickly show you how to heat up the spices. So we want to start with the whole spices that we have, putting them in a pan with a little oil. The whole ones are going to be careful because they like to pop. I'm going to turn down the heat a little bit. They're exploding a bit over here.
Don't get popcorn.
I turned it on too soon. My dog is laying here. He has no fear of hot oil. And then we can add those powdered ones. And they really just need to cook for like 30 seconds, just till they become fragrant. That's an important part of Indian cooking, which is the traditional place you'll find dals. And that is about good on these. So I've made this kind of a spice oil here. And then when my lentils are done, I'll add this into the lentils and kind of mash those lentils around till they soften. You really don't need to make this spice mix until the lentils are finished, which will be in probably another 20 minutes. But I just wanted to show you how that works. So.
And Dion, when that's done cooking, do you serve it over a grain or do you kind of eat it as is?
Yeah, good question. You could do either way. It would be common to serve it with rice. Basmati rice is really good with it, especially if you can find a brown basmati rice. We like to promote brown rice because it is a whole grain. You're getting all the fiber and protein rather than white rice. So, try it with rice. If you want to add another protein, you could do that. But like I said, the lentils are a great protein source on their own. Mm-hmm. You could also add a green vegetable on the side, another kind of curry. Lots of different ways to use this dish.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Well, I know I'm excited to try this recipe. It looks very good. Do you have anything else to add before we wrap up today?
I don't think so.
All right, great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. If you're watching this later, thanks for watching. And once again, there will be a survey in the chat that you can take to provide some input and feedback. And we look forward to hearing from you. And if you make this recipe, we're always excited to see how that turns out. So thanks for joining us today.
Bye.